Boy rescues dying service dog at auction. What follows will touch your soul. He barely reached the auctioneer's belt line, gripping a dented coffee tin packed with crumpled bills and birthday coins. Around him, murmurs turned into laughter. "He's worthless," someone muttered. But the boy didn't flinch, because while they saw a dying dog, he saw a soldier, a hero abandoned. And with a voice steady despite his pounding heart, he said, "I'll take him." But who was this quiet boy with storm-colored eyes? And why did a sick, broken German shepherd suddenly rise alert and listening when he spoke? The late spring sun hung low over the quiet town of Millstone, Tennessee, its warm golden light casting long shadows across the gravel paths of the county fairgrounds. Dust lingered in the air, kicked up by boots and hooves and the bustle of the town's annual livestock and equipment auction. Despite the scent of kettle corn and hay, there was a solemn undertone in one far corner of the grounds where crates and cages were lined up like forgotten luggage animals no one wanted anymore. 11-year-old Noah Walker stood quietly near the edge of the animal pens, clutching an old coffee tin that rattled faintly with every step. Noah was small for his age, thin as a cornstalk, with shaggy dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes like storm clouds, gray, sharp, and unreadable. He wore a faded red hoodie and jeans too long for his legs rolled twice at the cuffs. There was a stillness about him that made him seem older than his years, a boy who had learned silence not as a choice, but as a shield. Behind him stood his grandmother, Hattie Walker, a sturdy woman in her late 60s with a braided silver bun and eyes that seemed to see through people. Her face bore the soft lines of someone who had spent a lifetime in service and sorrow, first as a veterinary nurse, then as a widow raising a child alone after her son died in a farming accident. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it warmed the room like a stove in winter. Noah's mother, Elena Walker, hadn't made the trip. A schoolteacher turned night shift waitress since the factory layoffs. She worked too many hours and carried too many worries. Slender, with tired eyes and kind hands, Elena was the type of person who apologized when strangers bumped into her. Since her husband died 4 years ago, she had held their tiny family together with duct tape and quiet prayers. The auctioneer's voice boomed over the crowd, calling out bids on sheep-goats, and eventually the dogs retired working animals from bankrupt programs, strays from overwhelmed shelters, and those deemed unfit for further training. The bidding started briskly, especially for the Labrador retrievers and golden shepherds, still spry and eager. But as the handlers let out a limp-looking German shepherd with a dull, patchy coat, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Lot 47. Male German shepherd. 3 years old, retired from a failed service program. Some health issues. Returned twice. No guarantees. The dog didn't stand tall like the others. He was large but lean to the point of fragile. His ribs pressed against his skin like the slats of a fence. One ear stood at attention while the other drooped. His fur, once likely proud and shining, was now matted in places and missing in others, especially along his left hind leg. But what struck Noah most were the dog's eyes, amber tired and not quite broken. There was something ancient in them, like the echo of a battle long past. "What's wrong with him?" Noah asked quietly. The volunteer, a young man in a faded green shirt with a shelter logo on the chest, shrugged. "We call him Rex. Was training to be a seizure response dog before the program shut down. Had some medical setbacks. No one wanted to keep him. He just shuts down. Doesn't bark. Doesn't eat much." Rex lay in the corner of his pen, unmoving. A single fly hovered near his ear, which twitched once and then stilled. Yet the moment Noah knelt by the cage, the dog's eyes met his, and for a second, something passed between them. Recognition. Instinct. A whisper from one soul to another. The bidding began half-heartedly. $100, no takers. $75. Silence. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Come on, folks. Someone take him home. He's not mean, just quiet." Noah's hand shot up. "50, he said. The laughter was low, almost sympathetic. You don't want that one kid someone called. But Noah didn't back down. His fingers trembled as he pulled the lid from the coffee tin and began counting. Crumpled dollar bills, coins sticky with old candy, and 2 silver half-dollars his father once gave him for luck. All of it amounted to $53.40. "That's all I have," Noah said, lifting the tin toward the auctioneer. The man hesitated. "You sure, son?" Noah nodded. "He's not broken. He's just waiting." A pause. Then the auctioneer sighed, wiping his brow. "Sold. To the boy in the red hoodie." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, some amused, some confused. But none of that mattered to Noah. He clutched the frayed leash they handed him like it was spun from gold. Rex didn't resist when the cage opened. He simply stood slow and stiff and stepped beside the boy. "Looks like he chose you too," Hattie murmured. As they walked toward the truck, Rex leaned ever so slightly into Noah's side. Not enough to knock him over. Just enough to say, "I'm still here." They drove home in silence through the soft orange haze of sunset, past the faded signs of Millstone's edges, where clapboard houses lined quiet roads, and life moved with the pace of memory. When they reached their modest 2-bedroom home nestled at the edge of town, Hattie opened the back gate while Noah led Rex toward the small barn that had once held chickens, but now sat empty except for hay and memories. Inside the barn, Noah laid down an old blanket, his favorite one, soft with years and frayed at the edges. He folded it carefully into a square and patted it gently. "This is yours now," he said. Rex hesitated. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he lay down and rested his head on the boy's foot. Hattie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her silhouette outlined by the barn light. "You know this ain't gonna be easy, Noah," she said softly. "He's got history, and you've got school, and your mama's already worn thin." Noah nodded. "I know. But he didn't give up Grandma, and I won't either." She didn't reply for a long moment. Then, nodding slowly, she said, "You've got Walker in your bones, that's for sure." And as the first stars blinked above the quiet hills of Millstone, Rex let out a long, slow breath, as if finally for the first time in years he could rest. That night a soft wind rolled over the hills of Millstone, curling like smoke through cracked windows and whispering through the pines. The stars above shimmered against the dark velvet sky, silent watchers over the small town below. In the Walkers' backyard, the old barn stood sturdy in the moonlight, its weathered boards humming gently in the breeze. Inside, nestled on a bed of hay and the faint scent of forgotten years, lay Rex, and beside him, a boy with a promise. Noah hadn't gone inside after dinner. While Elena called out once or twice from the porch, she knew better than to press. Her son was like his father in that way, quiet when something mattered, but rooted deep in feeling. Noah sat cross-legged next to Rex, holding a flashlight under his chin, its soft yellow light glowing against the walls like a campfire. The old blanket he had laid out earlier had been his since kindergarten, navy blue with faded rocket ships and constellations stitched in red thread. It had once wrapped him during thunderstorms, under fevers, and in the dark corners of grief when his dad didn't come home. And now he gently draped it over the frail body of the German shepherd curled beside him. Rex flinched at first, his back leg twitching, but Noah's voice came low and sure. "It's okay. This is yours now. You're safe." The dog didn't move again, but his breathing shifted slower, steadier. Noah leaned in fingers, brushing over the shepherd's shoulder, and whispered, "I won't let anyone throw you away again. I promise." Outside the barn, Hattie watched from the window with a quiet pride and a flicker of worry. She knew what promises like that could cost a heart so young. By morning, Millstone was soaked in sunlight. The barn creaked as Noah opened the door, still in yesterday's hoodie, his hair uncombed and sticking up like wild grass. He knelt to refill Rex's water bowl and was surprised to see the dog sitting up waiting. His eyes were alert, not fully bright, but no longer lost. When Noah called his name, Rex tilted his head, one ear, perked, the other still flopped. Then he shifted forward, slow and stiff, and pressed his nose into Noah's palm. "You remember that, huh?" Noah said softly. "Somewhere in there, you remember." That moment settled into the boy's chest like an ember, warm and quietly powerful. Later that day at school, however, the world wasn't so kind. Millstone Elementary sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building with faded murals and a playground that creaked when the wind blew too hard. In Mrs. Raymond's fifth-grade class, news traveled faster than pencils rolled off desks. It didn't take long for someone to hear that Noah Walker had brought home a dying dog from the junk sale. At recess, Derek Hartley, a thick-shouldered boy with a permanent smirk and a talent for sniffing out weakness, cornered Noah by the monkey bars. "Heard you bought yourself a zombie dog," Derek sneered. "What's next, a pet rat in a wheelchair?" A few kids laughed. Noah said nothing. "Bet it drools and stinks too," Derek continued, stepping closer. "Is it even alive, or are you just playing vet with roadkill?" Noah turned to walk away, jaw clenched. But before he could move, a quiet voice spoke up behind Derek. "That's not just some mutt," said Luke Bennett, a boy in the same grade but taller and lankier with sun-bleached hair and oversized glasses that slipped down his nose. "That's a service dog." "You know what those are?" Derek narrowed his eyes. "Who asked you, pencil neck?" Luke shrugged. "I'm just saying. My brother had one. A German Shepherd. He used to get seizures. That dog saved his life more than once. And if Noah's dog was trained for stuff like that, it's probably smarter than you." The laughter turned. A few snickers bounced back toward Derek. Red-faced, he huffed and stormed off. Noah stared at Luke for a second, unsure what to say. No one had ever defended him before, not since Dad died. "Thanks," he mumbled. Luke offered a small smile. "No problem. I like dogs, especially the broken ones." They sat together at lunch for the first time. Luke talked about his brother Adam, who had autism and struggled to connect with people. But with his dog, Jasper, things had changed. He'd talked to Jasper before he'd talked to us. It was like Jasper understood the world he lived in. "What happened to the dog?" Noah asked. Luke looked away. "Car accident. A year ago." After that, Adam stopped talking again. There was silence between them for a while. Then Luke reached into his backpack and pulled out a torn page from an old dog training manual. "Found this in my garage. Thought it might help. Shows some basic commands service dogs learn." Noah took the paper carefully. "Thanks. Really." That afternoon, as the final bell rang and kids spilled out of the school like marbles across pavement, Noah walked home with the manual page folded neatly in his pocket and something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope. At home, he tried a few of the simple commands in the barn. Sit. Stay. Paw. Rex didn't respond at first. His ears twitched at the words, but his body remained still. Then Noah tried one more guard. Something shifted. Rex sat up, spine straight, eyes suddenly sharp. He moved to stand beside Noah, pressed lightly to his side, gaze scanning the barn door. It lasted less than 10 seconds before Rex sagged, as if unsure whether what he had done had any meaning. But Noah's eyes lit up. "You do remember," he whispered. "It's still in there." That night, Elena tucked Noah into bed, brushing his hair back with a tired smile. "You really love that dog already, huh?" "He's not just a dog," Noah said. "He's someone." Elena nodded, but her eyes lingered on the window where moonlight glinted on the roof of the old barn. She said nothing more, but a whisper of fear lingered beneath her smile. Loving something that could be lost, that was always the hardest part. The weekend rolled in with heavy gray clouds pressing low over Millstone, casting a quiet melancholy across the town. Rain tapped gently on the tin roof of the barn, rhythmically steady like a heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled of straw, warm dog fur, and the faint citrus of the soap Mrs. Hattie Walker had prepared. The old barn's back room had been cleaned out and converted into a makeshift washing area with an old clawfoot tub resting unevenly on bricks and a stack of towels folded neatly nearby. Noah stood with his sleeves rolled up, holding a sponge in one hand, and watching as Rex, now slightly stronger, stood shakily in the tub. The German shepherd's fur had grown softer since his first bath days ago, but patches of dullness and crusted skin still lingered. Rex didn't resist the bath, only looked at Noah with resigned patience, as if he understood that this was part of healing. "I think he's starting to trust you, Hattie," said her voice low and firm, the way it always was when she didn't want to show how emotional she really felt. She was a wiry woman in her late 60s with sharp gray eyes and silver hair tied back in a tight bun. Her posture was stiff from years of labor, but she moved with a quiet dignity. She had once worked as a veterinary nurse during her younger years, and though arthritis had crept into her fingers, her hands were still steady when caring for animals. "I think so too," Noah replied gently, massaging the shampoo into Rex's coat. But then his hand froze. "Grandma, what's this?" Underneath the mat of fur along Rex's flank were several raised ridges, scars, faint but deep as if something had torn at him years ago. Noah's fingers followed the pattern with reverent care. Hattie leaned in, her brow furrowing. "Old wounds. Look here, see that ink on his ear?" She brushed Rex's damp fur back. There, just along the inner edge of the right ear, was a faded tattoo, barely legible but distinct, a string of letters and numbers. Noah leaned closer, squinting. "Is that a military ID?" "Could be," Hattie said softly. "That's standard marking for dogs in service K9 units. This one, he wasn't just trained. He belonged to someone." Rex shifted in the tub, his paw slipping slightly, and Noah steadied him. The dog blinked slowly, ears drooping, but his tail gave the faintest of thumps. That night, while the rain deepened and thunder rolled over the hills, Noah sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor with Luke beside him. Luke had brought over a flashlight, 2 peanut butter sandwiches, and his dad's old laptop that still had a few government archive links bookmarked from a long-ago school project. They were hunched over the screen when the name popped up, U.S. Army K9 Unit Registry. Noah typed in the partial numbers they'd read from Rex's ear, guessing the missing digits based on formatting. After a few false tries, a match appeared. K9 Rex Service Designation Tactical Support, Deployed Unit Afghanistan. Retired unconfirmed. Status missing in action. Noah's breath caught. He was in a war. "Yeah," Luke whispered, and nobody even knew he made it back. They read more details about Rex's assigned handler, an explosion that separated the unit, and a note marked presumed dead or lost during operation. It was dated nearly 5 years ago. Noah leaned back, stunned. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the soft growl of thunder. "I've been sleeping next to a war hero," he finally said. Luke nodded, but his expression was distant. After a moment he spoke again, his voice lower than usual. "My brother was lost once, too," he said. "Not in a war, just disappeared. When we were camping in the mountains. He wandered off and no one could find him for 6 hours. It was getting dark. Everyone thought..." He swallowed hard. But Jasper found him, tracked him through brush mud, even across a stream. He was curled up under a tree, cold, scared. If Jasper hadn't found him... Noah sat silently, unsure how to respond. Luke never talked about Adam this way. "I think that's why I like your dog," Luke added, forcing a small smile. "He reminds me of Jasper, even the way he watches things." Noah nodded, grateful not just for the help, but for the trust. That kind of story wasn't easy to share. Later that evening, as Hattie folded laundry by the fire, Noah handed her a printout of what he and Luke had found. She read it in silence. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "You were right," Grandma Noah said. "He belonged to someone. Do you think they're still out there?" His handler. Hattie looked into the fire, her jaw tightening. Maybe. Or maybe this dog's story was never meant to end with the war. Maybe it was meant to find a new chapter. She picked up a framed photo of her late husband from the mantel, a younger version of herself smiling beside a tall man in uniform. "Your grandpa used to say that some souls carry purpose beyond what this world expects. Sometimes they find their way back, even if it takes a while." Rex lay curled on the hearth blanket wrapped around him like a cape. His eyes blinked slowly as if caught between past and present. Noah made a decision that night. He would write to someone, anyone who might know more. And maybe, just maybe, he could help Rex reconnect with the part of himself that had been lost overseas. But for now, he sat quietly beside him, resting a hand on his back. "You're not done yet, are you?" he whispered. Rex lifted his head just a little, and though the fire crackled softly, Noah thought he heard something else, like the faint echo of boots on gravel, a memory stirring from deep within. The wind carried the scent of rain through the narrow streets of Millstone as dusk settled in with a chill. Inside the cozy kitchen of the Walker home, a quiet resolve had taken hold. Noah sat at the table, a yellow legal pad spread before him, chewing thoughtfully on the end of his pen. A half-eaten grilled cheese sandwich sat untouched nearby, forgotten. The boy's brow furrowed in concentration, his fingers smudged with ink. He was writing to a place he'd only read about on military websites, Fort Hardwell, a military base 2 states over, known for its K-9 unit training division. With the faint tattoo on Rex's ear and the archived record he and Luke had uncovered, it was the closest lead he had. He needed to know more. Who had trained Rex? Who had he belonged to? And why had no one come for him? He read the letter aloud to himself under his breath. "To whom it may concern. My name is Noah Walker. I live in Millstone. I think I found a dog that used to serve in the army." He hesitated, then continued writing. His words were clumsy but honest, full of a 10-year-old's sincerity. When he finally signed it and folded the page into an envelope, he wrote the address with care, licking the stamp before pressing it down. He looked at Rex, who lay by the fireplace wrapped in the same blue blanket from their first night. "You ready to find out where you came from?" he asked quietly. Rex didn't move at first, but then his ears twitched at the sound of Noah's voice, and one paw stretched out slowly, as if reaching toward something only he could see. The next morning, Noah placed the letter in the town's red mailbox just outside Carter's General Store. It clanked shut with a metallic finality that made him feel strangely nervous. Back home, he rushed into the barn where Rex waited patiently. A few training guides and photocopied pages from the library were spread across the floor. Noah knelt, flipping through one labeled Basic Commands for Working Dogs. The page listed verbal cues, body language, and tone guidance. "Let's try some things," he murmured. He cleared his throat and stood tall. "Rex, sit." The dog blinked at him. "Nothing." "Rex, heel." Again, no reaction. Noah read further. "Some commands are based on handler tone and hand signals," the manual said. He tried again, adjusting his voice a little more firm this time. "Rex, down." To his astonishment, Rex slowly eased onto his elbows, then fully lay flat on the barn floor. Noah's breath caught. "Whoa," Encouraged, he moved to the next command. "Stay." He stepped backward. Rex held still, eyes focused on him like he had suddenly remembered a forgotten game. "Come," Noah called softly. Rex pushed himself up, walked stiffly but directly toward him, stopping inches from Noah's shoes. "No way," he whispered. "You remember." The next few days were filled with repetition and quiet discoveries. Each time Noah called a command, he learned to read Rex's slight hesitations, the muscle twitches that hinted at memory. Some commands didn't work, but others, they landed like they had been spoken by someone Rex had longed to hear from. On the third day, Noah tried guard. Rex didn't move. Instead, his stance shifted subtly, his posture lifted ears, alert, body rigid but calm. He stepped between Noah and the open barn door and stood still, protective, present. Noah's throat tightened. Later that evening, with twilight spilling gold across the sky, Hattie joined Noah by the porch swing. She held a steaming cup of chamomile tea and wore a thick knit shawl. The light made the lines on her face gentler, like soft folds in paper. He remembers things Noah said quietly. Things I didn't teach him. Hattie nodded slowly. The body remembers what the heart never forgets. There was silence between them. Rex lay nearby, eyes closed, but one ear always tilted toward them. "You think someone misses him?" Noah asked. Hattie sighed, gazing out across the field where shadows lengthened like fingers. "Maybe," she replied. "But sometimes good souls get lost on their way home. Your grandpa, he was one of those quiet men. Didn't talk much about the war, but when he came home, he wasn't the same. Some nights he'd wake up calling names I didn't know. Once he told me that the ones who didn't make it back stayed with him like echoes." She set her cup down gently. "And when he got sick, I used to ask him what he wanted me to do when he was gone. You know what he said?" Noah shook his head. "Open the door," she whispered. I didn't understand it then. But now, with you and that dog, her voice trailed off. "You think Grandpa would have liked him?" Noah asked. Hattie smiled faintly. "I think Grandpa would have saluted him." They sat together as stars began to prick the darkening sky. That night, after Noah had brushed his teeth and climbed under the covers, Rex crept into the room, his claws clicking softly against the wooden floor. The dog curled beside the bed without command. Noah reached down and ran a hand along his fur. "I hope they answer the letter," he murmured. Rex didn't respond, but somehow in the quiet that followed, Noah felt less like he was waiting for someone to come and more like someone had already arrived. The wind had been restless all day, tossing yellow leaves across Millstone's sidewalks like scattered coins. By dusk, a cold front had crept in from the hills, and with it came the kind of stillness that made windows creak and dogs lift their heads, as if listening for something only they could hear. Inside the Walker house, the fireplace crackled softly, while Noah sat on the living room floor, flipping through a tattered copy of Hero Dogs of America. His fingers paused on a photo of a German shepherd mid-leap wearing a vest that looked uncannily like the one Rex had come with. The worn patch on Rex's side still bore a faded insignia, the letters almost unreadable now, but the outline was unmistakable. Rex lay curled on the rug head on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. When Noah called his name, Rex lifted his gaze and gave the faintest tail thump against the hardwood. "You think you were like that?" Noah whispered, leaping over fences, saving lives. Rex didn't answer, but Noah didn't expect him to. Just down the road, the Harper family was wrapping up their night. Their home sat on a slight incline and was known for its bright red shutters and large porch swing. The family had one child, a 7-year-old boy named Mason, who had a habit of falling asleep in odd places under the kitchen table behind the sofa, once even inside the laundry basket. That night, while Mr. Harper stayed late at the fire station, he volunteered part-time. The rest of the family went to sleep early, unaware that a faulty space heater in Mason's room had started to smolder. At 2:47 a.m., Rex jolted upright. He didn't bark at first. His ears pricked. His body stiffened. Then a deep guttural bark ripped from his chest. Noah sat up in bed, heart hammering. Rex, another bark. Urgent, commanding. Beneath the howl of wind, Noah heard a distant pop followed by a rising crackle. Noah flung back the covers and ran to the window. A faint orange glow lit up the sky beyond the trees. The Harper's house. "Mom," he shouted. "There's a fire." Hattie was already halfway down the stairs, robe flapping, phone in hand. She had a practiced calm, the kind you only earn through years of emergency midnight calls as a former vet nurse. Noah turned back to Rex. "Let's go." He didn't need to say it twice. Rex bounded out the door, his body moving faster than Noah had ever seen. Noah followed barefoot on the cold ground, barely aware of the gravel biting into his soles. By the time they reached the house, flames were licking the sides of the porch, casting wild shadows across the yard. Mrs. Harper stood outside with her daughter, coughing, crying. "Mason's still inside," she screamed. "We can't find him. He must have gone back in." Noah felt his chest seize with panic. But Rex didn't hesitate. He bolted through the open door, disappearing into the smoke. "No," Noah shouted, but his voice was lost in the roar. Mrs. Harper clutched Noah's arm, her fingers trembling. "Your dog." "He's not just a dog," Noah said. "He knows what to do." The next moments stretched like an eternity. Then through the haze and flame a shadow moved. "Rex." He staggered forward, dragging something behind him, a small shape. Mason barely conscious, coughing violently. The crowd that had begun to gather gasped. Someone ran forward, lifting Mason into their arms. Another doused Rex with water from a garden hose, his fur steaming. The fire trucks arrived minutes later, but the rescue had already happened. Rex was a hero. The next day, the local paper ran the story on the front page, "Broken Dog Saves Boy in Midnight Blaze." A photo of Rex, singed and bandaged, was posted across bulletin boards and shop windows. The story went viral. Messages flooded in from across the state. At the makeshift ceremony held 2 days later in front of Millstone Elementary, Noah stood beside Rex on the library steps. He wore a clean blue button-up shirt, his hair combed for once. Rex, now fitted with a soft gray service scarf someone had sewn for the occasion, lay beside him, calm but dignified. Mayor Whitaker, a portly man with a booming voice and a permanent sunburned nose, shook Noah's hand. "Not every day we get a true hero in our town," he said, clapping Rex on the side. The townspeople applauded, and Noah smiled, though he felt slightly out of place. Rex didn't seem to care about the attention. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching. That's when Noah noticed the man. Standing near the back of the crowd, partly hidden beneath the shadow of an old maple tree, was a tall figure in a dark military-style coat. Late 30s, maybe 40. Broad shoulders, clean-shaven face, short brown hair with streaks of gray at the temples. He had the posture of someone who had once stood at attention for a living. But it was his eyes that caught Noah's attention. They didn't move from Rex. Even when others clapped, laughed, or took photos, the man stood silently, hands in pockets, jaw clenched. After the ceremony, while people patted Noah's back and offered baked goods and congratulations, the man was gone. Hattie approached him, balancing a tray of muffins. "Everything okay, Noah?" He nodded, distracted. There was a man, watching Rex. "Reporters?" "No," Noah said, shaking his head slowly. He looked like someone who knew him. That night, as Noah lay in bed, Rex curled once again at the foot, his breathing slow but steady. his ears flicking in his sleep. The burned patch of fur on his side had started to scab and his paw was wrapped, but he still seemed whole. Noah stared at the ceiling. He didn't know who that man was, but he was sure of one thing. Rex had just sent another echo out into the night, and someone somewhere had heard it. The morning after the ceremony, the air in Millstone was hushed, as if the town itself was still holding its breath after what had happened. A faint mist clung to the fields, and sunlight broke through in soft golden shafts, dappling the sidewalks, where fallen leaves curled like sleeping animals. Noah sat on the porch swing legs, tucked up, hands around a chipped mug of cocoa. Rex lay beside him, head resting on his front paws. His eyes were open, but he wasn't looking at anything. He was still. It was too quiet for Noah's liking. Inside, Hattie moved about the kitchen, humming an old hymn as she scrubbed out the coffee pot. She had always been thin, her frame wiry but sturdy in the way of someone who'd never had time to complain. Her white hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and though arthritis made her joints stiff in the mornings, she never let it slow her down. "Noah," she called from the doorway, wiping her hands on a faded dish towel. "Someone's at the gate." Noah turned. There, at the edge of the yard, stood the man from the ceremony. Now closer, his features were clearer. Square jaw, weathered skin, the kind of posture you didn't forget even long after you'd left the service. He wore a green army jacket over a faded t-shirt, and jeans, his boots scuffed but polished. His hands hung at his sides, motionless, like he was waiting for permission to step forward. Rex rose slowly, his ears perked, nose twitching. Then something happened that made Noah sit up. Rex took 3 steps forward, then froze. His tail lowered. His entire posture shifted from curiosity to tension, not aggression, but recognition. Noah stood and walked down the path. Rex followed more cautiously now. "Can I help you?" Noah asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man nodded, then took a step forward, removing a cap Noah hadn't noticed before. "Name's Marcus Reed," he said quietly. "I served in the Army K-9 Corps. I believe that's my dog." Noah's heart dropped. "You're saying you knew Rex?" "I trained him," Marcus said, eyes never leaving Rex. "His name was Shadow back then. He was part of my unit in Kandahar. We were deployed together for 14 months. He crouched slowly, not reaching out, just lowering himself to Rex's level. "I thought you died, buddy." Rex inched forward, ears now drooping, a low whine escaping his throat. He sniffed Marcus's hand, then pressed his head against the man's chest. Marcus didn't cry, but his eyes shone with the kind of grief that lives deep in your ribs. "I got hit in a roadside blast. Shadow pulled me out of the wreckage, dragged me 50 feet across gravel through gunfire. Then he disappeared." Noah could feel a knot tightening in his stomach. "What happened after I woke up in a hospital in Germany? They told me he was MIA, presumed dead. I filed reports, tried to find him, but the military transferred dogs all the time. Paperwork got lost. I eventually stopped trying." He looked up at Noah. "Until I saw the article." Inside the house, Hattie stepped out with her arms crossed, protective but not unkind. "You came here for him?" Marcus stood brushing off his hands. "No, ma'am. I came here to understand what happened to the best partner I ever had." The 3 of them sat on the porch steps as Marcus told them stories about late-night patrols, hidden bombs, and Rex's uncanny ability to detect danger before it struck. "He used to respond to hand signals before I even gave them," Marcus said. "We had a bond. But you know what the last command I gave him was?" Noah shook his head. "Guard," Marcus whispered. "He stood over me while I bled out, refusing to leave. And then he vanished." Rex, lying between them, thumped his tail once at the word. "Do you want him back?" Noah asked suddenly, his voice small. Marcus was silent for a long time. Then he looked at Noah, not just with his eyes, but with the measured weight of a man considering more than just logistics. "He's old," Marcus said slowly. Slower. Not the same dog I trained, but he still remembered me. That means something. Noah felt his throat tighten. But he's been with me. I mean, I saved him. At the auction, nobody else wanted him. Marcus nodded. "And he's been saving you too, hasn't he?" Noah looked down ashamed. "I guess. You're a good kid, Noah. And I can see he trusts you." He leaned back. Rex's shadow he was trained to serve. Looks like he found himself a new mission. That evening, Marcus stayed for dinner. Sarah Noah's mom had arrived home just before sundown. A lean woman with short-cropped hair and a nurse's tired grace, Sarah had seen enough of pain to recognize it in Marcus immediately. She welcomed him with quiet empathy and said little during the meal, but Noah could tell she understood. Over chicken pot pie and apple slices, Marcus talked more. Not just about Rex, but about the guilt he'd carried all these years surviving when others hadn't. Hattie shared stories about her late husband, a Vietnam medic, who also came home changed. "I believe some animals are angels with fur," Hattie said as she passed the lemonade. "They don't always come when we call, but they show up when we need them." Later that night, as Marcus stood to leave, he knelt once more by Rex. "You've still got purpose," he murmured. "And it looks like you've got people to protect." Rex licked his cheek. Marcus stood and turned to Noah. "You don't have to worry. I'm not taking him. I think he made his choice." Noah exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Marcus handed him a worn patch from his coat pocket. "It's his original insignia. Figured it should stay with him." As Marcus walked down the driveway, his silhouette bathed in amber porch light, Noah felt something settle in his chest. Not relief exactly, but peace. Rex stood beside him, steady and silent, watching until the man disappeared beyond the misty road. The morning sun spilled gently across the quiet town of Millstone, brushing the rooftops with soft gold. The leaves had started to turn a palette of rust and amber tumbling down the streets. At the Walker house, the backyard had become a hive of quiet activity. Folding chairs lined the lawn, a small wooden stage was being assembled under the old oak tree, and a banner hung between two fence posts read, "For those who still serve," a celebration of retired service dogs. Noah stood in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, heart thudding with nerves and pride. His brown hair was wind-tousled and his flannel shirt was too big in the sleeves. But his posture had grown straighter in recent weeks, and the way he moved through the yard checking each table, adjusting the water bowls for visiting dogs, spoke of a purpose that went beyond his 10 years. Beside him, Rex moved slowly but steadily, his body still showing signs of age, but his eyes sharp and attentive. A bandana embroidered with the word hero was tied loosely around his neck. He no longer limped as much, and his fur had regained some of its luster. The scarring on his ear had faded slightly, though the faint tattoo beneath still whispered stories of a life before Millstone. Banners a little crooked, Hattie noted from the porch, one hand shading her eyes. She was dressed in her Sunday best, a navy blue cardigan and a skirt printed with forget-me-nots. Her white hair was pinned into a neat bun, and a small silver pin shaped like a dog's paw glinted on her collar. Despite her age, she'd been the first to arrive that morning, bringing trays of oatmeal cookies and gently scolding the volunteers into action. Sarah stepped out behind her, adjusting a tray of lemonade. Her lean frame moved with the quiet strength of a woman used to long hours and little rest. Her eyes, soft brown and ringed with tired lines, found Noah in the crowd. She smiled a slow, proud smile that made the corners of her mouth lift in a way that hadn't been seen often since her husband passed. Down by the driveway, Luke arrived carrying a poster board and a shy, crooked grin. His sandy blonde hair curled slightly at the ends, and he wore a hoodie 2 sizes too large and sneakers scuffed from bike rides across town. He waved to Noah with the easy familiarity of someone who no longer saw him as the quiet kid with the dying dog, but as something closer to a friend. Luke set up the donation board near the entrance. It was covered in photos service dogs in uniform, some now gray-muzzled, some memorialized in sepia tones. In the center was a picture of Rex, taken just days before sitting beside Noah on the porch swing, both looking into the distance like sentinels. "Think anyone'll actually donate?" Luke asked, brushing dust off his sleeves. Noah nodded. "I think they will. People just need to know these dogs mattered. Still matter." As guests arrived, neighbors, teachers, even the mayor of Millstone, Noah's chest swelled with a kind of pride he hadn't known before. Tables filled with dog treats, brochures, and handmade crafts from the school art club. One corner of the yard became a petting station where children sat cross-legged listening to Hattie share stories about her time as a veterinary nurse. Then Marcus arrived. He wore a simple dark blue jacket and khaki slacks, his hair neatly combed for the occasion. In one hand, he held a framed shadow box. Inside was a collection of Rex's original service medals, carefully cleaned and arranged alongside a nameplate, Staff Sergeant Shadow, K9 Unit. When he handed it to Noah, there was no ceremony, only a quiet nod and the words, "For his wall, if you want." Noah couldn't speak, only swallowed and clutched it to his chest. At 2:00, the small stage creaked under the weight of applause as Noah stepped up to the mic. He looked out over the rows of chairs, over the sea of people who had once walked past him at school or whispered about the sick dog he'd brought home. Now they were all here for Rex, for something bigger. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice trembling at first. "A few weeks ago, I bought a dog no one wanted. People called him broken, too old, useless. But he wasn't. He had just been waiting for someone to believe in him again." He paused, glancing down at Rex, who sat beside the stage with his head high, ears perked. "And since then," Noah continued, "he's reminded all of us that second chances matter. So today, we're not just celebrating Rex. We're starting something for every retired service dog who gave their best and now needs someone to stand by them too." Applause rang out. Some stood. Hattie dabbed at her eyes. Even Sarah blinked fast, her arms crossed to hide the shake in her hands. Then, unexpectedly, Luke stepped up. He cleared his throat, then held the microphone with both hands. "I didn't plan on saying anything," he said, "but I wanted to thank Rex. And Noah." He turned toward them, his voice steadier than expected. "My brother, he has autism. A few years ago, he had a dog like Rex. Not the same dog, but that dog helped him talk again, helped him sleep without nightmares. We lost that dog last year, and since then I hadn't seen my brother smile." Luke looked down, then back up, "until he saw Rex, and until I met Noah. I didn't think people like Noah existed. Quiet, yeah, but brave in a way that makes you think maybe things aren't as bad as they seem." He stepped back into the crowd, cheeks burning, but not before Noah gave him a thumbs up. They didn't need more words than that. The fundraiser closed as the sun dipped behind the maple trees, casting the yard in warm amber light. The donation box overflowed. People lingered, sharing stories of dogs long past, asking questions about adoption and volunteer work. By the time the chairs were folded and the banners packed away, something had shifted in Millstone. It wasn't just a town with a heroic dog, it was a town that remembered. That night, as Noah curled up on the couch, Rex hopped up beside him, resting his head on the boy's lap. Sarah passed by on her way to the laundry room and paused. "You did good today," she said softly. Noah looked up. "We did." The morning of Noah's elementary school graduation dawned with a sky the color of soft linen, the sun slow to rise behind a thin veil of mist. Millstone was already awake. Windows glowed, porch flags fluttered gently in the June breeze, and in front of the town library a small crowd had gathered around something new, a bronze statue no taller than a child depicting a German shepherd sitting with calm dignity, his ears forward, eyes fixed ahead, as if watching over a world only he could understand. At the base, a single inscription, "For the broken ones who still save us." Back at the Walker house, Noah stood in front of the mirror in his room, fumbling with the collar of a navy blue shirt that Hattie had ironed the night before. His reflection showed a boy taller, now leaner, the roundness of early childhood nearly gone. His dark hair, longer than Sarah preferred, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His eyes, once unsure, held a steady light. Today wasn't just about a diploma, it was the end of a chapter. And Rex, old as he was, would be there. Downstairs, the living room smelled of toast and fresh laundry. Sarah stood at the stove humming softly, her frame thinner these days, but her presence as grounding as ever. She had let her chestnut hair go naturally gray, tied it in a low bun, and wore a simple green blouse that brought out the warmth in her tired eyes. Years of double shifts and raising Noah alone had etched lines across her face, but today those lines softened with pride. "Don't forget the speech in your back pocket," she called without turning. "I've got it," Noah answered, slipping the paper in beside his handkerchief. "Is Rex ready in the yard with Hattie? She's brushing him like he's going to a wedding." Outside, under the shade of the maple tree, Hattie knelt beside Rex. Her hands, though wrinkled and veined, moved with practiced care as she brushed the old dog's thick coat. Rex lay still, his body slower now, stiff in the mornings, but his eyes still bright and alert. He wore a faded service bandana, the threads frayed but clean, and his ears still lifted when he heard Noah's voice. "You'll outshine the mayor today," Hattie teased, giving Rex's chest a gentle pat. "Not bad for an old soldier, huh?" Rex huffed softly, tail thumping once. Hattie looked up as Noah approached and handed him a soft leather collar, not Rex's usual, but a special one worn only on days that mattered. It had belonged to Hattie's late husband, a military K-9 handler, and was given to Rex months earlier as a symbol of legacy. "He's ready," she said. The ceremony was held in the open-air amphitheater near the town green. Rows of folding chairs filled quickly with families clutching bouquets, cameras, and tissues. Teachers bustled back and forth, calling names and directing kids in pressed shirts and summer dresses toward the staging area. Luke arrived with his mother and older brother, waving broadly at Noah and Rex. He wore a tie that was slightly askew and carried a handmade sign that read, "Go Noah, go Rex." As the students filed onto the stage, applause rose like a tide. The principal, a stout man with a red bow tie and round glasses, welcomed everyone and began calling names. One by one, the students walked across the platform to receive their certificates, most with shy smiles and eager waves to their families. When it was Noah's turn, he stood slowly, taking a deep breath. Rex, lying beside the stage, lifted his head. Noah reached the microphone and unfolded his speech. His voice was clear, if a little tight. This year he began, "I learned how to multiply fractions, how to build a rocket from soda bottles, and how to see someone's worth even when everyone else says they're not worth anything." There was a small rustle of curiosity through the crowd. "I brought home a dog who was sick, old, and unwanted. People laughed. But that dog, his name is Rex, saved a boy in a fire, helped a veteran heal, and reminded me every day that the bravest hearts sometimes wear fur and scars." He paused, then turned slightly. "And today, I want to ask Rex to help me one more time." He looked down, his voice dropping. "Rex," he said, "guard." The command was simple, soft. Rex, who had been resting on the grass, rose with effort. The crowd hushed. Slowly, but with unmistakable purpose, the old German shepherd stepped forward. His joints ached, but he didn't falter. He climbed the 2 small steps onto the stage and moved to Noah's left side. There he sat, upright, proud, watchful. The audience rose as one. Applause thundered through the square. Some clapped, some wept. Hattie gripped Sarah's arm. Luke whooped so loudly his sign shook. Noah didn't speak again. He just stood beside Rex, one hand resting gently on his shoulder, the moment stretching like sunlight across a quiet field. Afterward, as people filed out, many stopped to pat Rex's head or thank Noah. The mayor, a tall woman with streaks of silver in her auburn hair, leaned in and said, "He's changed this town, you know. Not just you. All of us." Weeks later, the statue was unveiled in front of the library. It wasn't large or grand, just honest. Cast in bronze, Rex's likeness looked toward the horizon, eyes forever alert. Beside the statue, in a place where children would sit to read and seniors would pause to rest, stood a plaque with a simple line, "For the broken ones who still save us." Sometimes the miracles we pray for don't arrive with trumpets or shining angels. Sometimes they come in the form of a tired old dog standing guard beside a child with a quiet kind of courage. Rex wasn't perfect. He was scarred, aged, and forgotten by many. But through Noah's eyes, through love, faith, and a willingness to see beyond what the world calls broken, he found purpose again. And in doing so, he helped a town rediscover its heart. This story reminds us that God often works through the least expected, the ones overlooked, the ones others call damaged. But to God, no one is beyond redemption. Not a child, not a dog, not you. So if you're walking through a season where you feel worn out, left behind, or uncertain, remember Rex. Remember that being broken doesn't mean being useless. In fact, it might just mean you're ready to be used for something sacred. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. And if you believe that even the forgotten can become heroes, type Amen in the comments. May God bless you and your loved ones with unexpected strength, quiet miracles, and hearts brave enough to guard what matters most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because the world still needs reminders of the goodness we so often overlook.